Hello and welcome back to Prism& Company. My name is Colin, and on the docket today, something really exciting. The only thing that could drag my now rotted corpse back from the depths, from the earth, from the sinuous soil. Sinuous because my body's in it? I know soil isn't really sinuous. We're moving along. We are talking about Ephemere. Ephemera. 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 Now, if you're not familiar with this deck, it is by Arthur Wang, and it is the sister deck to the True Black Tarot. Although it's got a very kind of masculine feel to it, but still, the sister deck, none the same. And as you can see, these are gloriously chonk decks with beautiful specialty finishes. The True Black Tarot has a spot gloss. Ephemera has this incredible golden finish to it. Now, they do a lot of things the same and a lot of things different, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves because it's time to cue the intro. Full disclosure on this video, Arthur was kind enough to send me a copy of his deck, and can I just say, from the moment I set eyes on the True Black Tarot, I was a super fan, and the fact that he was like, I like the way that you talk about decks. Do you want to talk about this new one? I was like, oh yeah, you know I do. That being said, this is not sponsored. I'm not trying to get you to buy anything. I am here to talk about art and good art and cool tarot decks, and that's what we're going to do. But I wanted to say it up front just so there's no confusion or nobody thinks any kind of thing. And if you do think any kind of thing, I don't know, let me know or don't. I don't think any kind of thing. So we're moving along. Ephemera is really something special. It is, like I said, the kind of sister deck where True Black is all very dark with light pouring into the deck. Ephemera feels like it is just made of light, and it's using, darker tones to just carve and sculpt shape into it. It's so cool. And just covered in gold. This is the card back on every single card, and it's just dripping in these finishes. And I just love it. I love it. Now, the real meat of the deck lies in the Little White Book, which is not always true. I would say a lot of decks have pretty lame Little White Books, to be honest. And this book, similar to the True Black, I wish it was like 4 times bigger. I think these decks have enough cool stuff to say that I'm like, I want to hear more about it, especially the majors. But you get enough to wet your whistle and really get your mind on fire, and it's quite cool. Now, what is the new thing in this deck, you might ask? Well, our major arcana have been completely rewired. And if you know anything about me, you know that I love a major arcana that's different. Hashtag Ocean Dry, hashtag Henry Deck. All this stuff. Not only has the major arcana been renamed, it's been reordered, kind of. Some of it's in the same, some of it's different, but it follows the hero's journey. So if you're familiar with, oh my god, the name escapes me, the super famous dude who made the hero's journey, we're moving on. Y'all know who it is. That hero's journey. And these cards work in triptychs. So 3 cards at a time. So we'll be taking a look at these 3 panels together, understanding what part of the story the deck is talking about, and just kind of see where the journey takes us. By the time we get to the end, I think that Ephemere is trying to tell a very specific kind of message around storytelling. And I think that not only the content in the book and in the images speaks to that, but also the very way that the deck was constructed. So let's dive right in, because I want to start looking at beautiful images. Swoosh. Our first triptych includes Origin, Dream, and Summon. Now, before we dive in, can I just say a thing and then talk about it? No, we're going to divert. We always divert. I want to address the elephant in the room, at least in my room, and the elephant is the thing I'm thinking of, which is the gold on the cards. As you can see, all of these cards, the majors specifically, have all of these beautiful gold details. If you know the True Black, this will feel right at home. It's really incredibly chosen extra stuff that appears behind the figures and adds beautiful compositional elements. It adds wonderful loads of symbolism and flavor, and it's so cool. The thing that really struck me about this, which is different from True Black, is that in True Black, all of those details were invisible until you saw them in the right light. These, they are hugely, hugely visible, and then they kind of are highlighted in different light. For example, we have the letter behind our figure here in Summon, and it's very dark. In a deck that is all white, it's almost black, and really kind of imprints on the card in a different way. Instead of being this invisible thing that all of a sudden springs to life on the card, it's there and it's heavy and it's almost oppressive until you get some light behind it, and then all of a sudden it bursts forward in light, and you can kind of see what the intention was, because it reflecting light all of a sudden brightens it up to the point where it feels more ephemeral and illuminated, like the cards I think are kind of supposed to feel. They're drawn on white, off gray, for a reason. Now, do I think that that ruins the experience? Absolutely not. But there are some of these cards where I think that all of the gold weighs down the composition a little bit too much for my liking. I happen to like all three of these, but I'll point them out along the way. Just as a comparison piece, let's take a look at a True Black card. I can be so picky. I just looked through like the entire major arcana being like, which card exactly do I want to use to prove my point? I'm like, just pick one, Colin. But I'm going to pick my very favorite Hanged Man of all time, the Hanged Man from the True Black here. And as you can see, right now it's just the image itself. It's just light being cast into this dark space. But when we tilt it, it's revealed that there's all this extra detail. So it has the same kind of like pop wow moment that these do, the same sort of trick of light, but where these become invisible, these become more visible. So it does sort of the opposite thing with the eye. I just wanted to throw it in there for a little visual context. Visual context. Alrighty. Now, enough of my singing and dancing. It'll never be enough. It's never going to stop. Let's take a look at Origin, Dream, and Summon. So, we're in the Fool's Journey. We are just starting out. Origin is speaking to the very beginning, the kind of erupting of the story before things even start. This, as you could guess, is related to the Fool card. Now, in gold and back, I want to talk about these details too. We have Ginugagap, the primordial void of Norse myth where fire and ice created the world. So we have fire billowing up from the bottom here, really reinforced by this red cloth. And then we have ice, almost like icicles, trickling down from the top. And in the middle part where fire and ice are clashing, we have this figure with torn robes. It's very raw. It's very kind of... y'all, it's been a little while. Words are going to be a little hard, but we're going to make it through. It's going to be great. We have this chaotic kind of primordial energy boiling up. And I love the tattered robe detail. He talks about how this is not a necessarily like clean process in the story. It feels raw. It feels unfinished. And a lot of this deck talks about like cycles and things too. So imagine getting through an entire journey and kind of starting over again. You're going to have some bruises. You're going to be battered. So I think it speaks on a couple different levels. I also love that we're starting off, bam, with this red pop of color. I'm going to talk a lot more about color later on in the video, but just keep in mind that that's where we're beginning. That's the first thing you're seeing. Dream. This is our figure standing in front of DNA, essentially. Oh, geez, Louise, I have these things written down. The 4 nucleotides in DNA that make up the genetic code. And this is talking about the history of the human race, where we come from, the future of the human race, where we can go, and how the genome is one of the things that kind of carries us through that whole path and that whole process. Dream, we're kind of looking out at the story and where things are going to go. We haven't really gone yet, but it's just the wonder. It's the preparation before the call to action even. That is going to come in Summon. Summon, this is like one of my favorite True Blacky kind of like moments in this gold. This is a letter from the Salem witch trials. How freaking cool is that? Like, I read that in the little book and I had to put the book down and I had this big grin on my face. I'm like, okay, this is really cool with genome. This is very abstract, but I love the idea. This is like, oh my God, just the letter, boom, put in the back. I don't know what the letter is, but I'd love to imagine that it's a judge summoning one of the girls to trial. Oh, it just gives you chills. And that like call to action, that summoning is so cool. It's like such a grand way to start the process, but it's got kind of this dark flair to it. I think that speaks a little bit to like the darkness of the gold. It almost looks like black text until it doesn't, because there's kind of a severity to it. There's a sinister quality to a letter from the Salem witch trials being used. Now, this was the Fool. I forgot to mention this is the Magician. This is Justice. So our first major diversion from the normal order that the majors are in. And this is all about how our past judgments will be looked at by future generations and also will be judged. It's this circular judgment spiral happening. And I think it would cause one to take pause and think about, okay, the choice I'm making right now, what am I going to think about it, or what is someone else going to think about that 5 years down the road or after my action is complete? I think it's a really beautiful way to put an interesting spin on justice, which can feel kind of flat sometimes. I want to pause here because we've encountered our first major diversion from like the normal flow of tarot. Obviously things are renamed, but people rename things all the time. But our first diversion, it's so cool. My official stance, Prism&Co's official stance on this is it's so cool. I have taken a lot of decks out of my collection, even though they were gorgeous. I loved them. The art was really inspiring to me, but it was just another tarot deck. And that is personally not what I want out of a tarot deck. I want a tarot deck to be something new, teach me something new, and there's nothing like a little bit of new system that just gets your brain moving in a slightly different way. It rewires some of those synapses, and I think it's so exciting. It is the origin, dream, and summon to a new story being told, and I love storytelling in tarot decks. It's why I got into it. It's why I stay into it. So for anybody out there who doesn't jive with it and doesn't get it, I totally am. I hear ya. But for me, this was very exciting to see. It's a little bit disorienting at first because you got to learn it. I mean, it's like anything. You got to get in there and go, whoa, sorry, my foot fell asleep. You got to get in there and learn it. But once you do, it's so easy to make parallels and even read it the way you normally would. Once you know that someone is justice and look at the image, it's not that hard to tell, then you can just read it like justice if you want to. Or you can read in the keyword, like the new name of the card. Or you could read in it's part of the story. Or you could read in the letter in the back. I mean, there's all these different layers to it. And it's just more beautiful little threads to pull on along the way. Now, I've gassed on enough about the start of the story. Let's continue on and see where our hero is going. Here we have the fighter, the alchemist, and the keeper. Now, as we move on to this next triad, you can see that these pops of color are not very common. They're going to be very rare along the way. Now, it's interesting that we see color in the first two triads. Don't get used to it because a lot of these don't have any color at all. And especially as we get kind of deeper into the deck, you'll see it more and more. Now, fighter, alchemist, and keeper are three different properties of ourself as we go out into this journey. Fighter is our physical prowess. Alchemist is our intelligence and our changeability and change agility. And the keeper is our emotional anchor, kind of keeping us anchored and safe throughout all the craziness that's going to come. Now, if we are mapping these to a normal tarot deck, we have the Empress, such a cool Empress, the Priestess, High Priestess, and the Hierophant. So kind of similar to what we're going with. We're going to get wild here in a minute, but just a little bit jumbled around. Now, our fighter here, we have the Tolkien calendar in the background. So that is the ancient Mayan calendar. talking about kind of the impermanence of time. I always like to read the Empress as a safe space for someone to be in, and I mean that like capital S, capital S, safe space. I'm like, what do these words start with? And I like that she's kind of in this safe space as well, kind of surrounded, but also a badass and has a weapon and can take care of herself too. This card is really something special. Also, I really like how many different cultures are being pulled from. Like, we have three very different cultures here in three cards in a row. Such a nice little touch. It is an extra little layer of diversity besides just the people being displayed. It's also things from their culture and things that are important being shown alongside them. I think that's really, really cool. Anyway, fighter showing us the impermanence of time, the Empress, physical prowess, super cool subversion that this would normally be the Emperor. Yeah, just wonderful there. The Alchemist, we have a Chinese alchemical calendar in the background. I'm trying to keep too many things in my head at once here. So that is wrapping around. The book talks a little bit about how China is also credited with paper and some other kind of base inventions like that, which just led to like unparalleled growth in like human thought and being able to record things. And intellect just builds on itself and builds on itself, and being able to write something down is huge in that. I think that's really cool and very powerful as well. I love the purple that flows down here. Purple and gold is just such a beautiful color pairing. I think they're so stunning together. And the Keeper, this is a very interesting one. I'm reading off of a spreadsheet for some of these, so that's why I have on my spreadsheet. This card has Adiri textile patterns passed down by Yoruba women known for their compassion towards animal life, giving each other oriki or poem names. Giving the animals those poem names. Apologies in advance if I mispronounce these things. I really don't mean to. I don't quite know how some of these are pronounced. Now, this is an interesting card because I think this one suffers a little bit from the dark gold problem. It is almost hard to make out some of the beautiful details in the figure just because there's so much of the pattern going on in the background. Even with the gold shining like this, I mean, right there it looks pretty beautiful. It's almost like a halo around him. But I find it to be a little bit too much and a little distracting, which is a pretty low priority critique in my mind. Like, the actual pattern is beautiful, the illustration is beautiful, so you just got a lot of beautiful things. It's just a little bit hard for the eye to focus, but like, who cares? It's totally fine. And especially when it catches the light, all is forgiven in this non-important moment we're having. Anyway, we're rambling. So we're learning about ourselves. We're learning about all the things we have within our bones. Let's take a look at what we got next. Alrighty, here we have Voyager, Dulcis, sure, and Nemesis as our next trio here. Now, Voyager is talking about actually going out. This is the first time we are journeying out and seeing what's out there. Dulcis is the temptations that we face along the way, if we're boiling it down, and Nemesis are obstacles that we face. So in some ways, kind of internal and external obstacles. Now, our tarot correspondences here are Chariot, Devil, and Tower. So we're definitely mixing things up here, and I think that's really exciting. As we're going through, I'm realizing this one also has a pop of color. Maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe every triad, except for one, does have color. We'll see as we go. It's exciting. We'll discover it. Voyager, I think this is my favorite major. I love a nautical theme, and oh boy, is it just dripping in it. The anchor over here, the rope, we have the, it's not, hey, I'm just going to come in here for a second, and I forgot what that's called, and I'm realizing that I'm forgetting what a lot of things are called, and I just, 5 seconds ago said I like a nautical theme. So we're just gonna we're going to move past that part. There's a bird flying past his face, and I think that's a really exciting compositional choice because it's showing us, this person is kind of like going out, pointing at a star, moving, but these birds are like flying past, and they're not just like, I'm a bird flying past. They're like, whoosh. You can hear the wind coming off this card. You can feel it hit your face as you look at it. And they've got the blur on them. You can barely tell what it is. Like, if we didn't have this figure here, and especially if we didn't have the like little nods to the sea, I think it'd be very hard to identify what exactly we were looking at. Maybe you could get birds, but I doubt that you would get like seagulls or any kind of seabird. But within the context of the whole thing, boom, locks it right in. In the background, we have constellations and stars, and it's just that idea of like infinite possibility out there. You look up at the night sky and it's so huge, it's so big that there's just so much to explore. I want to pause again for a second. I was nervous in the last triad because the whole time I was like, is the fighter really the Empress? It just doesn't, like, all my tarot reading and training and everything is like, no, that's the Emperor. But no, it's totally the Empress. I checked the book and I was second guessing myself the whole time, and I love it. I just want to say again how much I love it. My hubby knows a lot of words. He spent most of his life collecting words. He loves language. He doesn't know what this word is. And so I was like, how do you pronounce this? He's like, I don't know. I've never heard it. So I'm going to say dulcis, and that's what we're going to go with. Dulcis here is the devil, and we see this very Eve-like figure with a fruit up there and the snake on the branch, sitting here with a caged bird, and then behind this very grim display of all our previously caught birds that are dead and hanging, and below all of these very tempting berries, which are making the perfect temptation for this bird to come and pause in the cage for a little bit of rest. I think, temptations along the way is just, it's part of the journey. And I like that it's coming so quickly. We are brand new to the world. We're just stepping out. You're going to encounter things immediately that you don't understand and that will tempt you and that you have to kind of get over. I think that's really cool. Nemesis, on the other hand, we see Nemesis here and all of the swords and the weapons of people that he has defeated before him. The kind of torn cloak, this time not from the newness of creation, but from the battle, from the ravages of war, stained blood red, from his enemies. And just the physical obstacles along the way. I imagine a body breaking. I imagine getting cut and not knowing what to do. I mean, there's so many things that could happen as you're journeying out, whether those are physical or metaphorical. And it's cool that we have these two side by side. And it's cool that they follow the Voyager. It's not the most optimistic view of the journey. We'll get there. But this is definitely, I think, a realistic one because immediately we're tempted and we're messing up and things are happening, and we gotta just keep trudging along. Flying in next, we have Obscurio, Burn, and Healer. These are just a really beautiful set, and we're cruising along with another color in the triads. I think I might just be wrong about this. Well, that's fine. I'm wrong about a whole lot of stuff. Obscurio is my personal favorite of the major arcana, the Moon. Burn is the Strength card, and Healer is Temperance. So we've got a really lovely mix together. And this is kind of foreshadowing the fall of the hero's journey and providing us with some healing after that fall as well. So Obscurio is obscuring the way. It's the confusion. It's the darkness of the night. And it's that kind of like all hope is lost moment. Burn is dealing with the pain of not knowing, dealing with the pain of consequences of things that you've done wrong. And the Healer brings resolution and some much needed respite to that figure who is confused, who is hurt, who's just gone through the previous two with temptation, with battling. It's a nice way to give us a little pause point, a little save point along our hero's journey here. Now, Obscurio. Yes, Obscurio. Sometimes I look at a word and I say it and I'm like, no, that's not right. Here we have Fulu talismans of Japanese and Chinese Buddhism, made for many uses like fortune, protection from evil, and they're made purposely obscure. So the writing on these talismans is purposely obscured because there's this veil of unfathomable otherworldliness. I thought that was such a cool little quote. So they're purposely made obscure so the magic works, because even though you don't exactly know what the talisman is for, because it was made with certain intention and for a certain thing, it still does work. So even though our hero is confused and lost, it's like every step along your journey is a step towards the destination. It doesn't matter if you're walking in the wrong direction, that's the direction you got to go at that moment. This figure is also holding up a compass, but all of the positions on the compass rose are scribbled out. And you can actually see like north is behind, south is behind, but there's this gold scribbling over the top. And that is just another obfuscation of your orientation. You don't know which way is up. You don't know which way you're going. And I think in a journey specifically, and especially coming after Voyager, which is so nautical themed, it's a beautiful way to point like, you honestly don't know which way you're going. Which leads us directly to burn. So we're dealing with those consequences. We're having a hard time, but we're pulling through. This is the strength card, but we have to experience that pain to move forward. This is a really, really beautiful bit of gold. Here we have ash and embers swirling all around of our figures, but there's a pine cone right in the center. And when I first saw that, I was like, I don't think I ever would have put a pine cone along the keyword burn, but the reason it's there is that there are some pine cones that only release their seeds after a forest fire or after a fire. And I don't know exactly how that works. I imagine the sap in the pine cones boils and opens once the fire is there, and then probably once it cools, maybe it hardens and then the seeds can come out. Probably. Nature's really, really cool. But that idea that even though the pain is coming from this, we still have the seed pod that's going to open and things are going to come out of that. Now, an idea like that is very often associated with the death card in tarot, among other ones, or like the tower card. I love that it's with strength. That idea of there is a purpose to pain, or you will get through the pain and it will make you better. That is strength to me. Like death is all about dying. There is ultimately things that come from that that's good, but man, it's about embracing that brutal point of no return. The tower is not about what's after the tower, it's about what's happening in the tower itself. If you're working out, let's say, your muscles are going to hurt after you lift the weight. You're going to burn after you face the consequence, but that literally will make you stronger. Bodies have to break down before they rebuild to get better. So I think this is an incredible little subversion of what a major arcana card might normally say, and a beautiful, beautiful inclusion in the gold details. Healer is all about my favorite leaf, the ginkgo leaf, and I learned some cool lore about the ginkgo leaf here. I like it strictly for its visual quality. I think they are beautiful. But this figure is wearing a lovely ginkgo leaf, and we see these ginkgo leaves as a halo around like a dandelion seed. And then some of those leaves are blowing away. So it's not only providing healing for our hero, but also healing from all these things and learning from all these things. We can then spread healing to other people as well. So those little bits of health are kind of blowing away and affecting so many more people. I think it is gorgeous. Gorgeous. Next up, we have counterpoint. And we also have counterpoint. And we also have counterpoint. This is a triptych that's also just one card. Now, I had the pleasure of chatting with Arthur a bit about the deck and learning some of his process and ins and outs. And I asked him, is this intended to be read as a triptych like the other ones? Or are you meant to pick one of these cards? Are you meant to leave them all in? And he was like, go crazy, whatever you want. If you leave all these cards in, you have triple the chance of drawing this, kind of zhuzh into your reading. I was trying to not say the word energy there. I don't love it when people say like that kind of energy in. It's just a personal pet peeve of mine. But for lack of a better word, the energy of counterpoint into your reading, or the intention or the meaning behind it. But you could just pick one, and they all, in some ways, represent the same thing. But they do depict very different things on the actual cards, which I think could lend to a lot of different flavor. It's really neat. Counterpoint, if you're not familiar, is a musical term, and we can see it best in this card. Well, the musical term we can only see in this card. And it's two different melodies playing at the same time. And even though they have different notes and different rhythms, they combine to make something greater than the sum of their parts. Two melodies intertwining, sometimes harmonizing, maybe being a little dissonant sometimes, creating polyrhythms. It's a beautiful way to listen to music. And, it's hard enough to compose one melody, let alone two melodies, let alone two melodies that work together when played together. It's quite an impressive thing. And here we see a male presenting and a female presenting figure, and they're surrounded by their two melodies, and it is bringing them together. I forget if I said this, but the counterpoint card is all about friendships, allies, meeting people. So we're finally kind of through some of our hard knocks, and we're getting allies along the way, and we're getting a little bit of help, which is great, because I think based on what we've seen so far, our hero kind of needed it. So our most traditional one. These are cool because these are two male presenting figures and then two female presenting figures doing very different things, but still offering a beautiful look at counterpoint. Here we have a hunter and a gatherer. We can see the spear in one hand and the bowl of fruit and nuts and whatever in the other. And they're surrounded by this garden of ferns. And I love these little plants over here. They're gorgeous. And also hummingbirds. And the hummingbirds are meant to mirror the hunting and gathering that's going on with our main human figures here, because they're hunting the nectar, and they're also helping the flowers gather the nectar from the other plants. You could also say that they're gathering the nectar from the flowers too. So however you want to look at that, but I think it's really beautiful and very cool. And then here we have an archer and a soldier. And this is kind of referencing how archers are like physically weaker, traditionally anyway, and they need help from the fighter who is stronger and can defend the front line. But the archer is perfect defense for them in the back because they're able to fire over the fighters, rain down arrows on the enemy, and provide support that way. So it's these two fighters offering support to each other in the way that they can. They're making up for each other's weaknesses with each other's strengths. That can be true of hunters and gatherers as well. You need protein from the hunter. You need renewable substance from the gatherer, amongst other things. And we all need a good jam. This is Call Me Maybe, and this is Mambo Number 5, and they're killing it together. Have you ever heard that mashup? It's not real, but it sounds great. This one is the one triptych I could think of that does not have any color in it, but it kind of makes sense because it's 3 cards that are kind of one card. I think I'm going to be keeping all 3 in for me. Although if I had to pick just one, it would be this because I love music. Up next, we have Seeker, Defiance, and Crescendo. They called me mad. Mad, they called me, but I knew there was one triptych without a color in it. Which doesn't matter. It's so beautiful. The color does not make or break a triptych. I just kind of thought there was one, and I was starting to think that I didn't remember right, but I guess I did. Here we have the Hermit, we've got the Star, and we have Judgment as our tarot correspondences. That was like glitter that I just threw there. Wouldn't that have been cool if I had glitter, and there was glitter on the cards, and then we were all looking at it, and we were like, whoa, that was kind of cool. This represents the introspective part of the journey. So introspection, resurgence, and then the climax. So kind of thinking and wondering, very hermity. We have a figure holding a lantern and a mirror. So they can look at themselves, they can look at the stars reflected in the sky. There's this bull-horned moon behind them, and the book describes all these stars as wanderers that come before or after us. So imagining all the other people alongside of us on this journey who came before us, who will come after us, and that's a really nice moment of pause amongst all the craziness. And it's also a nice moment of solidarity after the triple counterpoints. We met all of these people and allies, and that's fantastic. As an introvert myself, I would need a moment to rest after that. But I think it's also a great recentering on the story, because while there are other characters in the story, the hero's journey is about the hero. So we always want to come back to that. Defiance here, we have this figure reaching up to a star, holding a sledgehammer, trapped in this crazy maze, but they are breaking down walls. We have Asterion, the starry ruler at the top. This is up there, the mythological minotaur of the maze. And the idea of like, I'm not making my way through this maze in the way you want me to. I'm breaking down barriers. I'm doing it myself. It's that kind of hope that I'm not stuck. These obstacles will not get in my way. I'm going to forge my own path. This is another card that is very divergent in a lot of ways from the normal star card. The star usually feels very passive and soft. This card is all about action and going. And I think it speaks to a lot of the same themes, but definitely has a very different flavor to it, which is pretty cool. And then crescendo. This is the climax of the story, the big battle, whatever you want to call it. It's the exciting bits that are happening before we kind of tail off towards the end here. And this is Akkadian cuneiform of the Epic of Gilgamesh in the back. Ugh, so cool. This is the oldest work of literature and history describing the demon Humbaba. I think it's so cool. And even the figure itself looks very demonic. There's horns, there's no eyes, the mouth is very distinctively non-human. It's billowing smoke, very similar to the demon from the story depicted in the cuneiform text. We obviously have many arms, we've got weapons, it's really cool. This card also plays with scale a lot, like the Judgment card does in the True Black Tarot. We see these trees down here, or maybe like mountains or spires or something, and this figure is just totally dominating over the top of it. A very cool climactic moment. I think both of these could be kind of considered the climax. This is like the violins are swelling, and it was kind of peaceful and somber here, and now they're very staccato and they're moving, and then the cymbals clash at crescendo. I love all the music references. Yeah. All right, now we have Victor, Sacrifice, and Ovation. And these three all kind of play into each other in a way that some of the other triptychs don't. Like some triptychs feel like, voyage is happening, and then we're encountering a temptation, and then we're encountering a physical obstacle. It's very sort of like, here's how the story goes. But now we're seeing the victory of our story. We're acknowledging that every victory comes with a sacrifice, and then we're celebrating at the cost of the sacrifice that we made. So it is still definitely telling a story, but these feel more interconnected, to me anyway, than some of the other triptychs did before. Victor here, we have the Emperor finally coming back, but it's still a female presenting figure on the card. So cool. Sacrifice, we have the Hanged Man, of course. And Ovation, we have the Sun. Now, Victor, we see our Victor crowned with a laurel crown, emblematic of Apollo, bestowed upon the champion of the Pythian Games, symbolizing victory, triumph, and achievement. And we see confetti or celebratory glitter. Oh, like throwback from the last one, thrown in the air. Whoa, more glitter. But this time it was like clumped in the corner. It didn't work as well. Sacrifice, another beautiful pop of color. But now we see that blood red kind of draped over the face and hanging down, almost like they're bleeding. They're stabbing themselves with a sword. So cool. We see 4 stars at the bottom, and then a 5th star at the top, surrounded by this great serpent. This is Aztec mythology, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who created this world by sacrificing their own blood. So this serpent sacrifices itself to create the world. This is apparently the fifth and final incarnation of what the world will be. So that's chill. And then Ovation here. This is the one I'm almost like familiar with the least. A rangoli decorates the background, often drawn into the sand, flour, or other things, originating in the Indian subcontinent. So that's this pattern in the back. And then dial lamps burn at the bottom, used during Diwali to symbolize the triumph of light over the dark. I think that's really cool. So, being used in such homey spaces and in such mundane things like flour or sand, it's that homecoming, it's the return, but also the celebration of, light conquering dark at the end of things. I like the idea that the sun is the kind of climactic celebration, but in my mind, the sun not only illuminates and is a spotlight, but it can also burn you if you don't protect yourself. So dealing with the ramifications of what came in the past, I think that's highlighted a bit here in Ovation, this version of the sun card, in ways that other decks don't focus on as much, which I really like. Another way to subvert expectations a little bit. A really beautiful, almost end to our story, but way to kind of come down from all the action and realize we did a lot of stuff along the way. Last but certainly not least, we have Death, Legacy, and Continuum. Now we can see we're ending here with red the same way that we started with red in... Nope, that's the King of Coins. Wrong stack. Nope, that's... Okay, hold on now. Origin. Nailed it. First time. Okay. For Death, we have the Death card, to nobody's surprise. Legacy is the Wheel of Fortune. And No. Legacy is the world. Continuum is the Wheel of Fortune. So, Death, world, Wheel of Fortune, which makes a lot of sense for what Continuum is. Now, with Death, we have a skull floating in the air, telling of the Norse Ymir and the Chinese Pangu, giants who died and whose bodies became the world. So we see mushrooms at the bottom with that idea of dying, becoming something new, which I guess I talked about in the Strength card, Burn. It's not my favorite interpretation of death, but I'll take it. Mushrooms also eat decayed things, so that's fine. But we have this skull in the background, and in the cavern of the skull is the sky. Really beautiful, really cool. And it's raining down, creating water and other elements of the world that it's making. We can also see the small skull crying in her hands. That is a little bit reminiscent of the Moon card from the True Black Tarot, where we have somebody holding a bowl and reaching into it, and then we see their same hands reaching over them at the top. It's beautiful. It's very mysterious. It's awesome. Legacy, we have this person carved out of stone, almost statuesque, and behind them, ancient carvings from the tomb of Governus, I believe, dating back to 350 BCE, perhaps depicting waves of earth-based energies. It's some of the earliest known carvings, apparently. I actually looked up this tomb, and these totally look like the carvings from that tomb. It's quite cool. And knowing that we have a figure carved out of stone and carvings in the background, that's a beautiful little synergy between those two. This is another card that I think suffers a touch from too many dark details in the background. If this was True Black style, where those were only revealed in the light, I think it would have been a little bit stronger. But again, like, such a cool thing to include in the back, and especially knowing the source of this, I'm like, oh yeah, don't take that away. That's incredible. And then Continuum. And this is about how the story cycles. But there's a couple of important details here. This figure is holding a circle that is broken in half, and it's kind of stretching in different ways. Let's see if I can pop that in a little bit closer. And there's a lemniscate on top, the infinity symbol, but it's also broken. So it is not infinite in the same way that it's always repeating itself, but it does imply infinity. And this is the Tibetan endless knot behind, symbolizing birth, suffering, death, and rebirth. It's a little bit grim, Tibet, but I'll take it. And living in the world, I get it. So we do have an actual infinite symbol in the background, and then these non-infinite symbols. The thing that the book speaks of with infinite loops is that they're a little bit hopeless, because if everybody's doing the same thing over and over and over again, where's the growth? What are we supposed to do with that story? There's no momentum to it. It just is always staying the same. And even though you might learn something along the way and leave a legacy, ultimately it's just resetting back to zero. But this deck tells the much more powerful story of incremental growth. So even though every cycle might seem to the observer in it the same, big picture wise, we're always making steady progress. And this not only speaks to a more hopeful view of the hero's journey, but literally how humankind has evolved. We get better, we learn more, and we make changes along the way. We also get worse. We ebb and we flow and we change along the way. This is Arthur's favorite card in the deck, which I think is so cool, because this, I think, flavors the entire hero's journey that we've just seen in such a beautiful and powerful way that it makes sense why. It completely recontextualizes the hero's journey from something that just loops and cycles constantly and makes it something that is impactful and powerful. And we made it to the end. That's the whole shebang. I think I said what these cards are. Yes, let's regroup. There's one bonus card in the deck, and it's got this beautiful shooting star over water, with lovely gold. And I think it's the perfect way to just pause and take a little bit of a breath amongst all the craziness of the story. It's got these beautiful words on the back too. Lovely little inclusion. I love stuff like this. We've made it through the hero's journey here, through the new major arcana, and seeing all the individual story beats and story moments. And that in and of itself is cool enough and could carry the deck. I think that there is a subtextual thing happening here as well, that the way this deck is presented also tells and reinforces its ultimate narrative. And I want to go into that a little bit by not only looking at the major arcana here, but actually the rest of the deck as well. And we're not really going to go card by card. I just want to talk about the actual renderings of the images themselves. I talked a ton as we went through about how the pops of color are very rare. And we saw that, like 1 in 3 cards in those triptychs had a color, and then a couple of them didn't have any color at all. I was going to include a whole bunch of graphs in this. I went through and determined how many times does each color appear, how many times is a card gold and silver or just gold, but I don't want to get too bogged down in the kind of data details as much as I love to do that kind of stuff. Because the narrative here, I think, is really what's important. And what this is trying to tell is the story of living. If we're telling a superhuman story based off of continuum, where did continuum go? There we go. Continuum is kind of the anchor that this narrative is bound to. And it is a story about life constantly repeating itself and getting better and better every single time. And I don't know about you, but if you have lived and existed, not every day feels like this incredible, exciting journey that feels epic. A lot of times it feels boring and samey, and I think that in subtle ways this deck tries to tell that story as well. And for that, let's take a look at the court cards. As we take a look at the court cards, I said the word boring, and I want to be really clear that I don't think the deck is boring. I think that the deck plays on the idea of boredom in that it presents very stimulating information that becomes known and is hard to reignite the excitement of. I'll show you what I mean. Here we have all of the wands cards for the court cards. So we have the page, the knight, the queen, the king. The rest of the deck, as you'll see, is very traditional in its kind of interpretations of the cards, and a lot of the symbolism that you'll see too, but it's done in that beautiful, beautiful true black style. Here, you can see our theme of all of the court cards are these explosions, almost like fireworks happening in the background. And each one has incredible details. Even the placing of the firework is different. So nothing's really repeated here. But the first time I glanced through this deck, and even times after that, I was so taken by the variety and the interest of all the majors that when I got to the court cards, I was like, oh, these are kind of feeling samey. And I took for granted things like the incredible level of detail and rendering in the figures, things down to the hairstyles, the different skin tones, the different ethnicities, the positioning, the compositions on the card, where the gold was placed. There are so many little beautiful, masterful artistic details that you can just swoop by if you want to. For example, I could just say, oh yeah, all these have a starburst in the back, next, and move on. But we could say, no, the page here has a firework coming from the top and coming down. I see the page very much as like a fire being built or fueling the fire. So maybe this ash is falling to the earth and fertilizing the ground so something new can grow out of it and burst into flames. The queen is radiating this like the sun, where the king is directing this a little bit more with his staff over in the corner. Like there is stuff that you can read into that makes each of these explosions not necessarily the same. This is also true a little bit with the majors, at least once I got used to them too. I hope this is making sense, by the way. As you just thumb through the majors, you see a whole bunch of gold and a whole bunch of figures right in the center, and it becomes a little bit easier to start to gloss over some of the details. It's like, yep, we know it's going to be beautiful. We know it's going to be meaningful. On to the next, on to the next. The deck almost suffers from, it's like too good. It's too beautiful. And anything can become boring. So we just start to expect that level of beauty and the level of symbolism. And it just begins to wash over you. I want to take a look at some more court cards while I'm talking here. I think this speaks to the dulcis step of our hero's journey, where like temptation kind of comes in, and we're tempted to not take in exactly what we're looking at. We're tempted to just sort of glaze over and let the deck kind of wash over us instead of digging into the details. With the cups cards, you can see schools of fish swimming, and there are also some larger animals like dolphins or whales. Or little, is that a little fish over there? I think so. Yeah. But same idea. They're swimming in different directions. They're ebbing and flowing in different ways. And I think that it's very easy to look at these and see what's the same, but it can be hard to look at them and see what's different. The reason this all jumped to mind, the reason I'm kind of harping on this thing so much, is I have been here in this kind of space for the last probably year of my life. It's felt very kind of gray and the same and dull, and the experience of seeing something like this deck, it was so beautiful and breathtaking, but I was also like, okay, let's go on. And that was not the deck itself doing that. That was just life doing that to me. The kind of grayness, the kind of stagnation that life gives you. As we look at swords, we see tons and tons of swords in the background. Again, very similar looking backgrounds, but still kind of different. But as I was going through the majors in particular and reading about the gold details and really taking some time to look at the cards and give the details the time of day that they deserved, it broke my brain in such a good way. It really showed me that if you give things the time that they need and the focus that they need, then you can break out of those doldrum cycles and kind of get back to the exciting parts of life and see that, life is a continuum in a certain way, but it's also got all these little pockets. Every little moment can be just as exciting as every other moment. They're not all crescendos, but they can all be their own subtle beauty. You take a look at something like Seeker with a night sky in it. It's this quiet moment amongst all the chaos. That's just as beautiful as Crescendo, which is the demon carousing through the forest. both of those have their own voice. They have their own song that they're singing. Here we can see the coins cards, and we have these radiating lines amongst fields, amongst coins around the head. Again, a similar thing, but tons of different variety and compositional choices between them. So again, why bring this up? And why call this video Ephemere on Experience? Because this deck was an experience for me, just like experiencing life. Here we see the Ace of Wands, which is rainbow and beautiful in this burst of color. And, we have a few of those right at the beginning. And then we hit a little pocket of just gold and silver. And, as we move through, it starts to get easier to let these wash over you because they're monochromatic, because they don't have these little pockets and these little bursts. And even though you have incredibly photorealistic rendered water, you say, oh, that's water, and you sort of softly move on to the next until you hit your next burst of color and it jumps you back to life. And I just think that's so how life works. You go and you ebb and you flow, and then boom, something hits you, and for a little bit you're inspired and the muses are singing and you feel excited, but then it's so easy to fall back into the rhythm and the grind of the day-to-day until bam, purple hits you and you're like, whoa, that's so wild. And then you can really appreciate that. And like the Five of Swords here, there's this beautiful red. It might be a little hard to see on the camera, but like in the skull and underneath, there's all this beautiful red. And then bam, the inspiration keeps hitting with green. And then all of a sudden you sink back in and you sink back in. And I had to stop myself and realize like, wow, this is so parallel to my life that I just had to talk about it here, because this is a perfect example of something that has so much time and craft and effort put into it that it deserves attention and focus. And it doesn't just deserve ambient praise for how beautiful it looks. Each individual card deserves attention. For example, when I looked at this 5 and I saw the red glow, I was really taken because that was a powerful, bam, impactful moment. But it wasn't until I started looking at all the cards that almost every single pip has a red glow from the bottom, almost as if these are all floating over a red light source. And it's that heat is slowly kind of cooking all the images on the cards and making their, metal shake and kind of sing a soft song in the background. And then once you start to see those little details, you can appreciate that this pink or red is playing off of those red hues that are coming in from the bottom. And I think those little extra details are so cool. Even things like this card, where you would say like, oh, this one's white where the true black's black. That's not true. These cards are gray, and you can tell they're gray because he uses white in certain areas. And he's used white all along in like the majors and through the court cards. Let's take Death, for example. It's very hard to tell that he uses white in, say, the skull there, because next to the back of the card, you're like, oh, those are the same color. He just didn't color anything in. But when you see this, you can see, no, that is white directly next to the gray of the back of the card. It's breathing all of this extra light and detail in that you just didn't know was there before, or wouldn't know if you weren't really looking for it. One of the Cups cards, too, I think the Eight of Cups with the octopus, has some white radiating lines. Maybe I'll be able to find it here. So I was really taken by not only the story that the deck was trying to tell explicitly, but also the way that the deck kind of mirrored how I see grayness in life or feeling uninspired, and just sort of renewing my appreciation for small details and for the smaller moments of life. And now I can go back and appreciate every card for what it is, every line for what it is, and even things like the cards I was talking about in the majors that had a little bit too much gold for my taste. That's fine, because that is something that makes me think and engage with the card and be excited about it. because if I was just feeling gray and floating along, I might not have ever noticed that I thought, oh, this composition is throwing me off in a certain way. I just would have let it float on by and said, wow, that sure is beautiful. Did it drive anybody else crazy that I forgot to show you the octopus? Because it was driving me crazy. Nine of cups, excuse me. We can see a white solar system, I believe, in the background beneath the octopus's tentacles. So bravo, Arthur. I think you did an incredible thing with Ephemere. One of the things that Arthur told me he was nervous about was reimagining the major arcana and trying to tell a more direct story instead of the traditional, maybe not so traditional fool's narrative that runs through. I think that's awesome. I think that's beautiful, and you did an incredible job. I think the more subtle narrative of appreciating life and details for what they are and not taking things for granted, for me anyway, was way more powerful and way more exciting. Now, that being said, you get to experience both. It's not like those are independent of each other. You still get an awesome, beautiful retelling of this classic hero's journey. You get reimagined majors with incredible symbolism and all this gold and a kick-ass box to boot. And that is exactly why tarot is so exciting to me. It takes me from a place of living and mundanity, and it just infuses magic and thought and whimsy back into my life. And for that, I say thank you, Tarot, and thank you, Arthur, for making things that engage my mind in such a way and are very, very inspiring on so many different levels. Thank you for letting me get a little bit more poetic than I usually do, a little bit more introspective. I think it certainly called for it, and certainly where I've been the past few months, years, it's kind of called for it too. But this has been a very fun way to come back and talk about something that I really love, and a deck that has proven to be something very special in the collection. I'll see y'all next time, and I hope you have a really wonderful gray day where you can see every little white detail and gold swirl on top. All right, everybody. Bye-bye.